It's number 154, Fieldbuses and Interoperability. This is Gary Minchell, and this podcast is brought to you by Ignition from Inductive Automation. I'm in back home in Ohio the first week in October, not at either the Yokogawa or Wonderware events in Orlando, and I hear that people are probably leaving early because of the impending hurricane, so I hope all my colleagues and friends are getting out of there okay. It made too many weeks of travel to go down there this week, so I'm just getting news updates from friends and other news sources, and it seems very interesting. I'll address that at the end of the podcast. But I wanted to talk about last week's trip, which was to Phoenix. Considerably drier climate, even though it did sprinkle out there on me, and the PI North America Annual General Meeting. PI being Profinet, Profibus International, and the North American chapter of that. It's the annual meeting down there. I missed last year. It's the first time I'd missed in probably 12 years, and it's unfortunate. Know a lot of people, a lot of good people go down there and always have a fine time. So this year I went to the meeting mostly with the question in mind of what's the future? Do these field buses, if you will, have a future? What's going to happen with Profinet versus all the stuff going on about just Ethernet in general, the way things are going? And it was an interesting time, and the best explanation came from the head, the chairman, or whatever his title is, of PI and PNO, the international organization, Karsten Schneider. And Karsten discussed, in general, what's going on with Profinet and the protocols and the technologies and so on. And I wrote about it in my blog post, and you can go look that up at themanufacturingconnection.com. But I thought I'd just tackle a couple of things here. One, first off, yes, I think Profinet has a future. I don't know that it's a huge growth future, but it will keep going. And in 2015, the total node sales, as far as they could tell, of Profinet passed the total node sales of Profibus for the first time, although that trend has been going for some time, and we knew it would happen. And so just expect more Profinet in the future. Nothing wrong with Profibus. It's just it's an older technology, and the world's moving to Ethernet. So that being said, Karsten did bring up an interesting point in new technologies. It's an IEEE working group working on a new standard called TSN, Time-Sensitive Networking. And this is very important and something you should keep your eye on. And this is not just an industrial standard, but the industrial people will eat it up. The people that really want it are commercial interests who do things like streaming video over the internet, over Ethernet, if you will. And this is a technology standard which will help provide high speed, as in really high speed, and deterministic Ethernet networking. The implications of this are quite interesting because it will probably be implemented within standard Ethernet chipsets. So just standard commercial Ethernet chipsets in a few years, maybe 2, 3, not really sure right now, will incorporate this TSN. So like all technology curves, it'll begin being a little bit expensive, and then as millions get made and sold, the price will come down. And when the price comes down, the implication for us is that you can do Profinet just over standard Ethernet, just nothing added or whatever, and it works just fine to a certain degree. But if you want deterministic or real-time in your Ethernet network, the best way we've discovered so far is with a chipset, and Profinet's is IRT. EtherCAT, for example, is a motion control primarily network, and it's always had a chipset, and so on. The one that doesn't have a chipset is ODVA's Ethernet/IP, and they have really tried hard to do everything in software with just protocols, and they have had a heck of a time doing it. integrators have told me stories about trying to implement SIP motion, so we'll just talk about that in passing and keep on going. So anyway, the implication of TSN, if adopted and implemented, would be that the IRT chip that Profinet has could go away, and you could do real-time deterministic Profinet over, basically standard Ethernet, the standard Ethernet that is to come in a few years. So interesting thing, something to watch for, some good technologies coming. But if you're building on Profinet, you're still going to be using it for years to come. No problem there. Remember the field bus wars of years ago, which still continue a little bit. Things have evolved and they've calmed down a lot. Due to some economic circumstances, the Heart Communication Foundation and the Field Bus Foundation have merged into the FieldCom organization, and they both use EDDL as their device descriptor language embedded in that. Well, through another initiative called FDI, the Profinet organization works with, there's some interoperability and data exchange that can be had between a Profinet implementation and a Foundation Field Bus or Heart implementation. And good for users, because if you've got a big plant, you probably don't have just one field bus in a whole big plant. So it is quite useful. Well, the announcement at this last field Profi organization meeting was a partnership with CLPA, the CC Link Partners Association. And CC Link is another one of these field buses with an Ethernet implementation as well, that's developed basically out of Mitsubishi in Japan. And it's big in Japan and quite well adopted, I think, into China as well. So there have been people who, companies who have made an interface between, or a gateway between, Profinet and CC Link. And every time somebody does it, they implement it a little differently, so the poor user is stuck again like usual. How am I going to do it? So the two organizations said, let's build a standard for interface between the two networks, make it easier for the end users to interoperate between the two. So we have interoperability across a lot of these organizations now, and the kind of the odd man out of all these things is ODVA with its Ethernet IP protocols. And we'll see if for some reason they decide to join and go through an FDI or some other kind of implementation and get a little interoperability going that way. I think it would be good, but then I'm not running these large automation companies that try really, really hard to keep their customers tightly bound within their ecosystem, and have this tendency really not to like too much open interoperability. So anyway, for the most part, the field bus wars are over, but we still have some problems on that. So let me talk about interoperability just a little bit. I did not go to the Wonderware event. It would have made like 8 weeks of travel in a row, and on my budget and my lifestyle, that was just way too much. It was the last one. I'd already committed everything else, and it was the last invitation in, so I didn't go. So I've been watching the news coming from the event. And Wonderware made a number of significant, I think, announcements. I'm trying to dig into more. My sources have given me some indication of what's going on, but not a lot. So I'm still digging. For one thing, they released a new batch manager, batch processing, and my friend Walt Boyce has tweeted a few times on that. And the gist of it is that it does not support in any way ISA 88, an international standard for batch, or I think the number is ISA 106. It doesn't support either one. And evidently when he asked in the press conference, they said, we don't need it. Okay, what else can I say? Is this an indication of the future direction of Wonderware Schneider Electric, that they want to keep everything as inside their ecosystem as possible and not letting anything escape? So that being said, they have come up with a new release, something called Prometheus. Oh darn, I should have looked up the Greek myth about Prometheus. But anyway, so they've got Prometheus, and Prometheus looks to me, from what I could tell from really sketchy information in the press release, kind of like a new, updated implementation of the old Infusion. Infusion was an enterprise control system, which was kind of Wonderware technologies taken over by Foxborough to use in their DCS system, well, above their DCS system. So this thing purports to be a layer of software above everything in the plant. It looks down at all the assets, be they devices or PLCs or whatever, and sucks everything up and reads all the stuff, and then you can actually supposedly program all the PLCs in your plant from this software. Unfortunately, it also says that what it does is it exports XML. And then later on in the press release, it didn't say you could program it. It just sent a config file in XML, and then you would have to go in and finish your programming. There's too many questions on it. And the other question is, does it use any standards at all? Is everything custom-built drivers for everything, and custom-built this and custom-built this, and everything's proprietary within the whole thing? Or is there some use of standards and interoperability in this whole software? Don't know. Asking questions right now, and as soon as I find out, I'll let you know an analysis of the whole thing. But it looks interesting. The enterprise control system that they came up with Infusion had an interesting look to it. It was an ability to look at your plants from maybe a division point of view, where I could look at many plants and see what was going on. I could get better information for decision making and so on. The programming part I'm not so sure about, but maybe, and I don't know how it all boils down. So we'll see how all that goes. But it's intriguing, to say the least, and I'm sure that when things settle down and the people settle in back home after escaping the hurricane, which I hope they do, that I'll find more, and then I'll let you know more about it. So we have interoperability, we have field buses, a lot of stuff going on. I will be traveling in the next 3 weeks after this one. I'll be doing Dell World and learning more about their IoT gateways. I will be at Emerson Process Management's annual Emerson Exchange Users Group, and later on I'll be at Rockwell Automation, probably mostly talking to their partners, but there'll be a lot of Rockwell stuff going on too, I'm sure. So especially with their recent acquisition of Maverick and what the heck is going on there. A lot of stuff going on finally. Gee, the summer was so dull. There was like no news. So there's a bunch of news now. And this is Gary Minchell reporting it. This is number 154, Field Buses and Interoperability. And this podcast is brought to you by Ignition from Inductive Automation. Thank you for listening. Have a good day.